Howdy. Is that thing recording? I think it is. Hard to tell with these damn cameras whether or not they're recording. Anyway, I want to talk to you about something. In World War I, right at the beginning, 1914, the British Expeditionary Force ended up in France when France was fighting the Germans. The Germans had just come down through Belgium, and the generals in France were pretty stubborn and pretty obstinate, pretty stupid. And I think it was it Falkenberg or was it Schliemann? Anyway, the Germans had this plan of sweeping down through Belgium and cutting off the Germans. Well, when they got into Belgium, since Belgium had a reciprocal treaty with England, England declared war on Germany. So that's how England got into the war. Well, they had their the old Contemptibles, as they were called, the original British Expeditionary Force in France to support the French in the event of hostilities. Well, hostilities came, and when the German army came and crashed into the French army, it was absolute mayhem and slaughter. So the French did what they had to do, which was dig trenches just to hold the line where they were. Well, the Germans and the French both came up with this bright idea called let's outflank each other, and they all decided to outflank to the right. Well, right to the Germans, left to the French. It was called the Race to the Sea, and it was sort of a northwesterly direction they were headed. It ended up in Flanders. I have a book around here somewhere called The Towers of Flanders, and it's a book full of sketches, woodcuts of the church towers throughout Flanders before World War I. There were some beautiful ones there, but a church tower is a perfect opportunity for a sniper or for a spotter for artillery. So artillery's knocked down every church tower they could see throughout Flanders, which was a shame. Some of those were well over 1,000 years old. I'm sorry, I like old stuff. Well, when the British, they ended up on the left side of of that line of trenches, and they were in an area around the old Flanders medieval city of Yerpes. So it became known as the Battle of Yerpes, which was one portion of the Battle of later Passchendaele. Well, anyway, the trench became static. English had a trench, French were over on their right, and the Germans had a trench facing them, with no man's land in between. And every now and then they would go over the top, and half of them would get slaughtered on either side. And then the other times they're just sitting there in the trench, twiddling thumbs and doing nothing, because that's the army life, is hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. Well, while they're waiting, some bright sparks on the British side decided that they would publish a newspaper, because after all, there wasn't much else to do, and some of them had the traditional wry British sense of humor, shall we say, and they thought, well, this might be fun. Oh, hold on a second. I need to adjust this so I can turn it. Okay, there, I can turn it now. Oh, cameras. I hate cameras. Anyway, the British typically, these are Tommies, the typical British soldier. They weren't sophisticated. They weren't Oxford graduates. They weren't fancy scholars, so they didn't know how to say Yerpes. So they dubbed it Wipers, and they came up with a newspaper. And this is a book about it. It's called the Wiper Times, the Wipers Times. It's published by Osprey Press, and what this is the actual text of those 1914 through 1918 trench newspapers that they published. And they're full of wry humor of the British soldier of that time. Some of the problem was the Wipers Times only came out with a couple of editions. Then it took on a new name, and a new name after that. It came out there was like 23 editions of this under various names, but all of them together are called the Wipers Times after the very first one. See, this is called the New Church Times. But this is the text of every single one of them, going from 1914 to 1918. BEF Times is the name of another. But Fascinating book, just fascinating. I forget where I heard about it, but I heard about this and I started digging, and I found a used bookstore somewhere, I forget where, and they had a copy of it. Osprey Press. This is what it's called. Make a note of that if you're interested. It's a really interesting take on the life of a soldier in World War One and how they got about and what they did, and it's just full of wry humor, talking about the issues of the of living in the trenches. You know, dealing with the rats, dealing with the mud, dealing with trench foot, dealing with the god awful noise of artillery. The fact that your buddy's head just got blown off a minute ago, the stench of no man's land where all the bodies are rotting, all those other lovely things that happened in World War One. That's why the people of World War One, the men of that time, were called the Lost Generation. So many of them died. I mean, there were so many widows throughout England at the time. So many women who never married because there just weren't enough men to marry. It took a long time to regain the population. Anyway, but this is the written by the guys on the ground in World War One in the trenches, and it's just hilarious.